and today I am joined by dynamic duo, Whiskey Fix boys, Joe Montanez and Ryan Westeren. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Today we're trying something a little different. I'm pretty excited. Ryan has no idea what movie we're seeing, and while I did tell Joe the title of the movie, I gave him explicit instructions not to look anything up because he's a notorious looker-upper.
I have no idea what this movie is about. I have no idea what the score is.
Yes.
I have not told Ryan what the movie is.
Good. So, because you guys were coming on the show and representing the Whiskey Fix, I wanted to pick a movie that I thought might contain some whiskey, but there's no guarantee because I've never seen it either. I just thought it might be classy sometimes.
Well,
So,
yeah.
drum roll. The movie I picked is John Travolta in the 2018 flick Gotti. He's a mob boss.
Gotti.
So,
Okay.
it's our first drama on the show, and I'm not going to tell you the rating until after we watch it. Also, a new thing for this episode, we're talking about it before we sit down. Mm-hmm. You just saw the movie art. John Travolta plays John Gotti, and we're going to go watch it.
I will say, I remember when I saw this trailer, it looked interesting to me.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would like to add, I think Pam didn't trust me to not look up the movie, which is why that was withheld from me.
I want you guys to be surprised.
Okay.
And I'm excited for this one because I don't think John Travolta is not my favorite actor, but I do kind of expect this movie would be good. So
John Travolta played Fonzie, right?
oh my god.
I'm just kidding.
So anyway, we're gonna
that joke
That
went
felt flat.
really well. Yeah.
Yep.
we are gonna pause the podcast and go watch the movie and be back here shortly.
All right. See you in a bit.
Okay. See ya.
And we're back. Wow, is all I kept thinking through the whole thing.
I'll say this to start out. For what felt like 2 hours into the movie, I had asked Pam to pause it to see where we were, and we were barely halfway through.
Yeah.
Which is to say the movie was only an hour and 45 minutes.
All right. Well, just to start, I didn't tell you guys the rating. What would you maybe rate this? Or what do you think it's on Rotten Tomatoes? Not your rating, but what do you think it is on Rotten Tomatoes?
Man.
Obviously, you know it's 17% or below to be on this podcast.
Yes. Knowing that this podcast watches films and discusses films that are 17% or below, this has to be a solid 4%.
4% is what you think is on
Wow.
there.
Honestly, it would kind of generous. I think it might be 12.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm so happy to tell you guys what the percentage is. 0.
No.
It's a 0%.
How many reviews in total?
What?
Critics 54, audience 7,989. The audience score is 47%,
Okay.
but
the
critics
score,
is 0 out of 54 critics.
Yeah, that's a fair number of critics.
So for our listeners, just like we do on every episode, I'm going to read a little synopsis, go through the cast, the rating, director, blah, 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 before we really jump into it. Did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I just didn't know if you wanted to mention that we were drinking whiskey throughout this podcast.
Because it's kind of like what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Key theme in this movie was the boss of the boss. That's just like a key phrase, a key saying. And so when we sat down, the Whiskey Fix guys need to drink some whiskey during this episode, and they picked...
We are drinking a Four Roses single barrel pick from Brown Derby here in Springfield, Missouri. It is an OBSV aged at 11 years at 51.7 ABV.
I mean, yeah, it's fitting for a crime boss.
Mm-hmm.
It would drink nothing less.
Yeah, this is what the boss would drink.
The boss of the boss.
Yeah.
Which also, I said before we watched the movie, I was hoping there would be some whiskey in the movie. And what, about 10 minutes in, he asked for a whiskini. Oh, I mean, a whiskey neat, said in New York terms.
Yeah.
Oh, is that really what it was? Whiskey
Yeah, he
neat?
said whiskey
Yes,
neat,
whiskey
but
neat.
I did not catch that. I thought it was whiskini.
yeah. I was like, what is this drink I've never heard of?
Did you guys know it was whiskey neat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally went the entire movie thinking it was whiskey neat. Let me get a whiskini.
And you kept it up. That's fine.
Okay.
It was a good bit.
All right, synopsis. Gotti follows infamous crime boss John Gotti, played by John Travolta, his rise to become the Teflon Don of the Gambino crime family in New York City. Spanning 3 decades and recounted by his son John Jr., the movie Gotti examines Gotti's tumultuous life as he and his wife attempt to hold the family together amongst tragedy and multiple prison sentences. And just as hard as it was to read the word Gotti so many times, so it was to follow the movie. It was so difficult.
Very much so.
Main cast, John Gotti was played by John Travolta. John Jr. was played by Spencer LaFranco. Victoria Gotti, the wife, was played by Kelly Preston. And the other, for me, notable name in the cast was Stacy Keach, who played Neil.
The old guy.
Yeah, the old guy.
Yeah.
Which I've seen him in a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff. Is he the bad guy in one of the Jason Bourne movies?
I don't know. It's quite possible. Movies rated R. Director was Kevin Connolly. Highest rated movie is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Teenage Paparazzo from 2010. I've
Never heard of it.
Never seen it. And his lowest rated movie is Gotti. His other notable movies, I did want to say, Antoine Fisher he directed.
Which was a great movie.
And Secretariat.
Wow.
So he's done some
Wow.
really good ones. He's directed a lot of movies. He's done quite a few, this being his worst. With that said, we're going to read the overall critics' consensus out of 54 critics. And it's simple, short, and sweet. All it says is, forget about it.
I love it.
That's
Okay.
that's the consensus. Okay. So now you guys know a little bit more about the movie, maybe. Let's jump right into it. Let's start off on a positive note. Any highlights for you guys? What did you guys like, if anything, about this movie?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna rack in my brain. Honestly, the intro just made me laugh, which was
Yeah.
great. And if it makes me laugh, I would think that's a high point with the
Yeah.
the whole intro.
This rated R drama. It made me laugh. It's a great movie. Yeah.
The whole intro song with Pitbull and featuring whoever else is on that
Yeah.
track.
That honestly, it wasn't a bad song.
And
Yeah.
it was like kind of this definitely Italian mobster. It started out that way, and then the song morphed into this more thug.
A typical Pitbull song.
Yeah, hip hop. It got pretty fast.
Yeah.
So I was like, weird energy to start off.
Yeah, the thing that was most enjoyable for me in terms of highlights was that it did make me laugh quite a bit.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure that was not the intended purpose of this film.
Yeah.
The cars are great.
Oh, yeah.
There were some killer vehicles.
A lot of really old Cadillacs.
So whoever was in charge of that, they did a good job.
Well, a little more background on the movie as we're talking about highlights. This movie obviously didn't do well with critics or commercially, but I did read that it did receive some praise for its use of makeup. So when you guys produce a movie, you really if nothing else, I hope they like the makeup, right?
Well, I would have to say one thing about John Jr., Gotti Jr.'s makeup stylist freaking plastered his hair to his head
Yeah.
so thick.
This guy's wearing more product than the salon at
Oh,
Walmart.
you're trying
I don't
to
know.
get the salon at Walmart.
Throughout the movie, I kept trying to figure out how to make these jokes about this guy's hair, and I really could not put any of them together.
He's got so much olive oil, he used all the olive oil. I think that's one of the ways you
I
said
don't
it.
know.
Oh, man.
I will say, so one of the things that you mentioned is that in the kind of synopsis of the movie, you talked about this spanning the 30 years of John Gotti's life. Well, at least that pictured in the movie. And you mentioned the makeup as well. The only thing that I noticed as we were switching from decade to decade was just that they were wearing different makeup to make them look older. Like, the scenery didn't really change. They kind of drove the same cars the whole time. They dressed similarly the whole time. So even though it's supposed to be a period movie switching from decade to decade, the only thing was making John Travolta's face look older. I mean, they didn't even bother making John Jr.'s look different at all.
Look old at all.
Yeah, he was the same
So,
throughout the 25 years he was in the movie.
yeah, one thing that really bothered me, moving into the lowlights, I guess, but it's kind of tied in there with the highlight, I guess. And I said it so many times while we were watching it, as I don't understand why in this movie they try to patchwork actual newsreel, actual photos of what John Gotti and John Gotti Jr. looked like, but then like in the movie, it's not like a afterwards, like, oh, here's what they really looked like or anything like that. It's like patchworked as if it's the news footage playing while you're in that time period, and it just threw me off because honestly, John Travolta and what's it, Spencer LaFranco, who played John Jr., don't really look anything like the characters that they're trying to portray. So even with makeup, going back and forth between this newsreel and then the acting, I don't know, threw me off.
I think they got the hair down.
Sure.
You know, they were showing pictures of the real Gottis, and then the actors that played both of them. They definitely got the hair.
And I would say
down.
John Travolta more so than Spencer LaFranco, but I mean, yeah, exactly right. And even in those last few scenes where he's supposed to be older and like sitting in a prison, they overlapped it with like news articles, and the actual John Jr. looks so much older than they portrayed in the movie. But it was weird because they put those items together.
I don't mind when movies use actual footage in the movie. I kind of find that enjoyable because I feel like it makes it more relatable when you're watching the movie characters. But what I didn't like about this movie is that they would use actual news footage, but then like superimpose John Travolta's picture in like actual news footage.
Yes. No, see, I would prefer that. Because it doesn't make sense to me to be recognizing John Travolta as the character for like 45 minutes and suddenly see some other guy in a newsreel. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
But they flip-flopped with both of them.
Exactly.
They were way inconsistent.
Yeah, that's what it was confusing, especially with the timeline of the movie and then adding all these things. It was like, okay, I don't know who I'm following when. I kind of got off track here. I will say the...
Yeah, are we almost to the negatives yet? Because there's a lot to talk about.
Ready to unpack that.
I think the scene that connected with me the most, I will say that for me, the best scene in the movie was finally towards the end of the movie when John Gotti and John Jr. are having their like final heart-to-heart before he gets up to leave. And I think that was the scene that felt the most sincere and the acting was the best, was that final clip when he was telling John Jr., do what you gotta do, plea how you gotta plea. I was like, all right, finally, I might be reaching here, but maybe I could feel something towards these characters.
Wow.
But it took that whole time, and that was the only time. I know that setting of them talking in that room was pieced up through the movie, but that final time right before he leaves was the only time that I like felt anything for the character.
Okay.
Otherwise, I agree. It was funny. Like right off the bat, Joe got up to go get something, and Ryan and I just started laughing when the first time John Travolta turns to the camera. Like, what is happening?
Such a weird move.
Yeah. Okay, well, not a whole lot in the realm of highlights there. So let's go into movie low moments.
Okay, I'll start out on this one.
Okay.
I think the worst part about this movie is the terrible Italian accents that every single character has. It is just so over the top, phony Italian. Like adding S's to the end of everything. Yeah. Like, what are you doings? You know, like what are you doings?
I took just a few notes during the movie, and one thing I wrote down is Travolta's accent reminds me of Prison Mike from The Office. Like
Yeah.
Steve Carell's Prison Mike character.
Yeah.
Something feels weird.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Like,
I don't know. It's bad.
It was so. The film was. Oh gosh. The film was so hard to follow because they were trying. It was like a shotgun of names. Every single scene. Every single scene was basically a different environment. Them talking about why the boss is the boss, and you don't question him.
Yeah.
And then they just blurt out these names of people you're supposed to just know
the chin.
or figure out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they all have these like nicknames for each other, and so like cool, and that's really what it was. Like, okay, we got a problem. We're gonna take care of it. We're gonna sit down in this living room. We're gonna say their names. We're gonna say why the boss is in charge, and then we take care of it. That was basically the whole movie.
Yep, that is the overarching theme of this movie is the boss is the boss.
Yeah.
Or the boss is the boss.
another note that I took down was this is a movie that reminds me that acting is make-believe. Because there was no point. As soon as anyone came in the room, every time Kelly Preston talked, I was laughing.
Yeah,
it was a total joke.
That was rough.
John Travolta, oh man, it was just bad. Acting was terrible, and it was like the whole time I never got enveloped in the story. I was reminded what acting is.
Yeah.
Acting is fake.
That's good.
Yeah. There were some, what's the, are we allowed to say the word penis on this podcast?
Yes, you certainly can.
There were some interesting penis innuendos, that was kind of like, it was like weird because they would be talking about nothing, and then all of a sudden, you should see the balls on this guy. It was like, why is he making just a lot of penis jokes?
Yeah.
Or, not jokes, but
Yeah, really had to wonder what was like.
Did they
whose choice was that? Was that like a director choice or like, you know what? They actually just did talk about dicks all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just a fact.
Yeah.
So we got to throw it in there. Yeah.
That's the most historically accurate part of the movie. Just what they said
we
about
have so many
penises.
quotes.
Yeah.
And we have to put them in there. Yeah.
obviously this movie was based on real life events, so I'm not spoiling anything. If you were to Wikipedia it.
Please spoil whatever you want about this movie.
But in one of the scenes early on in the movie, and probably the first mention of a penis, John Gotti's youngest son dies in a car accident, and all the other crime guys are kind of around him, like, "Hey, John, it's gonna be okay." And out of nowhere, he goes, "He didn't even have hair on his prick yet." And I'm like, wait, why? Why did he go there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. There was a scene too after his son died where John Travolta goes into Kelly Preston. There's none of these scenes make sense.
Yeah, the best part of that scene was it was so over the top and dramatic. He rips open the blinds, the sun's right on her,
Yeah,
she's
she's
like,
acting like it's burning her skin.
yeah,
She's like,
and like, yeah, put all the medication in this. You're gonna get through this. Enough moping around. Blah blah blah. Just berating her, and then he leaves. I'm gonna make you some coffee.
Yeah.
Walks out.
leave all these drugs here. I'm gonna get you some coffee.
Yeah.
Oh man! And then of course it's fine. We zoom forward into another part of their life, so we don't really know where we are ever.
Yeah,
This
cutscene,
movie,
jail.
It jumped around so much, and I get that it's supposed to jump around. We're supposed to see different aspects of John Gotti's life, but the constant back and forth between we're going forward 10 years, we're going back a year, we're going back a couple more years, now we're jumping up 10 years. It is all over the place.
Yeah.
And so maybe the theme is just supposed to show John Gotti's life in general, but there is no theme to this movie.
Yeah, but
It is
even
a
that, like,
mess.
what did we learn about him? What do we? I mean, other than he got convicted a bunch of times, is that what this movie was about?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was hard to know because they hardly did anything. Mm-hmm. They did a few things, but primarily, like I said before, would go into a room, talk about the boss, how they were going to handle it, throw out their names, and then cutscene to another time period.
Yep.
I gotta bring up though I think all three of us, one of our favorite moments in the movie was when John Jr. meets his wife.
Oh boy.
Yeah. The cookout.
They're having like some block party or something.
Which is in the mid 80s. But I'll say this. Yeah. The music is another Pitbull song.
Yeah.
So Pitbull plays a very large role in this movie.
Yeah.
In terms of background music.
Uh-huh.
So they're at this black party, and John Jr.
It's just so ridiculous.
Ridiculous. John Jr. sees this woman who clearly looks like she's maybe in her 30s. Maybe I would even say late 30s for me.
In terms of an actress, like
yeah. And he goes up to her and he's like, hey, let's get a drink or whatever. And she's like, I'm 16. I can't drink that. And he's like, all right, a soda then. And the three of us look at each other. We're like, 16?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And then the more confusing thing is it flash forwards maybe a few years later, and then that's when they're getting married.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, man. And then
I have no idea how old John Jr. is.
Yeah,
exactly. Because he never gets older either.
Yeah, so I'm like, is that okay?
Who's the actress that plays his wife?
Megan Leonard.
Megan Leonard?
His wife is named Kimberly, and Megan Leonard plays Kim in the movie. Anyways, but then back to her age though, is right at the end of the movie they show John Jr. hugging his wife before he's gonna go to jail, and somehow she looks youngest when she's supposed to be oldest. She looked super old when it was supposed to be the 80s, and then I thought that was one of his daughters when he was first hugging her, and then he like holds her a little longer, and I was like, oh wait, that must be his wife. Mom? Like I didn't recognize her, and she looked so young then. I don't know.
Yeah, so weird.
All right, so acting. What did you guys think of the acting? We've sort of talked about that already. I thought it was terrible. I think Stacy Keach probably acted the best.
Yeah, I mean he's
just kind of the same character and everything. But
he's typecast. He's that like strong, kind of intimidating type. So I mean that's the role that he does best, and that's the role that he played in this movie.
Which he did well, except he got the worst lines.
Yeah.
They gave him the worst lines.
Maybe like 10 lines the whole movie.
The boss is the boss.
Yeah, so it's like you want me to say, Paul's the boss. Let everyone know that he's the boss and not to question him. In this scene, got it. I just did that like 2 scenes earlier, but he's like, same thing.
This time I'm going to put the emphasis on is.
Yeah.
The boss is the boss.
Yeah.
The boss is the boss. Like, oh gosh. All right, so story. Obviously, it's a real story. It's interesting from a gangster perspective, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was told well at all.
Yeah, this is a genre, and I say genre, but it's real life. But there are so many other movies that did it better. Honestly, the first movie that I thought of when we started watching this was Black Mass. With Johnny Depp, that came out maybe a year before this did, but that was that followed the crime boss Whitey Bulger in Boston, and that movie was really well done. I have so many negative things to say about Gotti. it is so bad.
Yeah, it just would not stop. It wouldn't. Oh gosh.
And then it ended the same way it began, which was just.
Which would probably be the only thing for continuity.
Yeah.
Would be the start and the end. Brought back the song, which they started with. So, also, I mean, it's so frustrating. The movie was just frustrating. Because you couldn't, as if you couldn't understand, or if you couldn't even track where it was going, A. B, hard to understand what people are saying. C, what they're saying is terrible because it's just weird names and weird lines. You put that all together was Gotti's deathbed, where he's got a cancer mouth, and I'm not like I jokingly you put that wet, like, of course you're not gonna be able to understand what he says. It's like, but he
Yeah.
already has a terrible accent.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you have to put that on top
Yeah.
of that. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I have no idea what he said for that
Yeah.
whole 5 minutes.
I was going to bring up the wedding scene. There's a couple scenes
I
I'm
was just
thinking
gonna
of
bring
now.
up the wedding scene though, so this is
I'll
perfect.
start with the wedding scene. John Jr. is getting married to, his 35-year-old, 19-year-old bride.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
His Benjamin Button
soda
bride.
girl.
yeah, there's some live jazz music, and it was great. But then when the song is over, there's a really interesting scene where John Travolta's character turns around and gives like a thumbs up to the band leader, and then
Almost in the
band,
style of like an 80s freeze frame, like
Yeah.
fist in the air, only it was just like a thumbs up.
and then the band
Yes.
leader gives him a thumbs up back, and it's a really odd but yet intimate moment between John Gotti and this character you know nothing about.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yes.
why was this in here? Like, what is... I would be more interested to see the backstory behind their relationship as opposed to what this movie was actually about.
Yes.
Oh man.
I mean, yeah, are we supposed to know if that person was famous? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
It could have been like Sinatra's son. Is like my only thing because I have nothing to base off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why, but just how he sounded, that's what it seemed like. But they didn't introduce him or anything.
But it was
He's just
important to capture the thumbs up.
Yeah, it was an
what?
odd exchange of
Yeah.
thumbs up. There's a scene where John Jr. and some of his buddies like kill a guy in a bar, and then they're back at the safe house afterwards. And John Travolta's character, walks in and just starts slapping the shit out of everyone. Like, not hitting, but like open hand slapping. And what I thought of is like, there's guys in like sound studios that have to make noises.
Yes.
And then, they insert that audio digitally. Like, when they were putting together the audio of this movie, I could just see the audio engineer like hitting the slap noise button just like nonstop for 45 seconds in this scene, because there is an awful lot of slapping that happens, and I found that to be hilarious.
Yeah, it was so good. I think a standout scene for me was there was after a meeting with Paul, the boss at the time, before he was taken out, and they were at his big old mansion. Everyone walks out, they get in their cars. Paul's in his front door wearing wearing his whole suit minus the jacket. He's decided to put on silk pajamas over
the suit.
the suit. You can see the shirt and the tie, and that's all you see of him. He's like giving everyone a hug, deuces. I go back in, but I just love that look for Paul. It was the end all and be all of business casual.
It was the boss of business casual.
You can't get more business and you can't get more casual.
Yeah.
And we'll be good.
Perfect. All right, we're moving into the reviews segment. So this is where I read a few critics' reviews and a few non-critic reviews, and you guys tell me if you think that they are appropriate or accurate.
Before we move into this next segment, I do need to get a little bit more whiskey in my glass.
Please.
So here is me pouring whiskey into my glass.
Wow.
Man,
ASMR the shit out of that.
Yeah. It's so good.
Okay. Johnny Alexinki from the New York Post says, I'd rather wake up next to a severed horse head than ever watch Gotti again.
Wow.
I mean, that's
more mob jokes.
Yeah,
Like it.
pretty dramatic, but I'm not gonna disagree.
Yeah, maybe that'll be the next review. Waking up to a horse head. How is that? Weird.
Alex Gordon from the Pittsburgh City Paper says they've delivered a dish that's somehow burnt and cold, bland, and overspiced.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I like the food.
I think that's pretty well said, in my opinion.
that person should write food reviews.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pittsburgh City Paper, they're hiding you, Alex Gordon.
Maybe he's actually the food writer, and the
then
movie
just
critic was
this.
out that week, and he had to fill in,
Yes.
and he just went to what he knows best.
He's like, how can I describe this film?
Or even better, he
Burnt.
he was
Cold.
actually reviewing food, got put on the movie assignment, and just submitted the food review as his movie review.
All right, this is our last critics review, and it's from Tim Brayton from Alternate Ending, and he says, the best so bad it's good movie of 2018, if not the entire decade.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
That's a good question.
I don't think that this was so bad it's good. I think this was just bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it did. It definitely had its moments that were funny.
Yeah, but this was a
'cause
drama
it was so
about a
bad.
mobster.
Yeah,
Like,
it was supposed to be very serious. It just was not. It was not delivered.
it did not deliver. Nope. So this next review is just a regular person, and they chose the username KKnifeC, and they said, "How about the movies? You like what's that movie you like so much about spaghetti, meatballs, or something? Go see that." That was a direct quote from the movie, if you guys remember John Travolta talking to his child
yeah,
when he
yeah.
gave him the money. So that's where this review starts, and he says, edited in a blender, this laughably bad biopic of the notorious John Gotti was mired in development hell over the last decade with something like 4 different directors and countless rewrites. The final product is an absolute mess of extremely violent spurts punctuating a boring series of clunky framing devices and Goodfellas-style narration. This review does continue to go on, but I will say the last sentence of the review says, then Pitbull does the main theme. If that's any indication of the poor decisions being thrown about in this catastrophic love letter to a horrible criminal. 1 star.
Yeah.
And what was the purpose of that scene, too, when he's like, here's some money, get some ice cream, go to the movies. And the one kid's like, I don't like ice cream. And he's like, well, get a fudge pop.
Yeah, he's like, what
and then
do you
he's
like?
like, I don't like the movies. And it's like, what is the point of this little conversation right now?
Yeah.
I didn't understand
And
why
why
that was
why
in
were
there.
they? And they were so sad
Yeah, they were so sad.
for no reason.
Yeah.
And he just comes in. gives
Somebody just gave you money, kid.
some
Like,
cash,
get
yeah.
the F out of here. All right, final review. We're going to end on a high note. Dative T says, just got back from seeing this and I loved it. 5 stars.
Huh?
Who?
That's just
the best review?
that is just an average person out there put 5 stars and they said that. That was it. That's, if you go to Rotten Tomatoes,
Okay, so
go to Rotten Tomatoes. That review is on there
can we
for this
post?
movie.
Can we post a rebuttal to that review?
Reply.
Rebuttal.
Yeah.
It was not good.
Do
What-
you like movies?
Are you sure you meant to write that on this movie? All right, so final thing then. If you were to give this movie a percentage of your own, what would it be? And you know what? I think that I'm going to give it... I think 0 is pretty harsh. I think I'm gonna give it a 3%.
If I had to give it a 1 out of 5 whiskeys,
Ooh.
it would get 1 whiskey.
Yeah.
And that's
What does that equate to percentage-wise then? 25%?
Yeah. I
Less
guess.
than
20?
20%?
Yeah, 20.
All right, giving it 20%. Wow. Joe?
I'm going to give this movie a 5.
A 5. All right. So
Yeah, I stand behind 20% because
There's
I have seen so many more worse movies than this. So I know how like far the barrel goes.
And you know what? There was an entertainment value to this movie, although it was not experienced in the actual drama, but rather the comedy of them trying to be serious.
And you know what? I am thinking back, and we did laugh a lot. And maybe I should rethink my so bad it's good statement, because I said it was just bad, but we laughed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it is so bad it's good. But I'm going to stick with my percentage of it.
Okay.
For what it is, it was supposed to be a drama. I think so bad it's good is a whole different category. And it was really bad for what it was trying to be.
What did you give it?
3%.
A 3?
So our cumulative percentage from Cream of the Crop and the Whiskey Boys from the Whiskey Fix is 9.3%.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what we got. And I feel that is very nice of us.
It's
Yeah, I mean, that's nicer than what Rotten Tomatoes gave it.
yeah. So yeah, that's pretty brutal.
Great. Well, that concludes the show unless you guys have any other comments.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Whiskey Fix. And that's whiskey spelled with an E. At The Whiskey Fix.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
It. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Congratulations, you made it through episode 3 of Cream of the Crop. Thank you so much for listening. Obviously, you found us on one of the platforms, but if you are looking for the other ones to like and subscribe, we're on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and you can give us a follow over on Instagram at Extra Whip for behind the scenes and extras. See you on the next episode.